Good morning. Good morning,
Good
Rach.
Good
morning.
morning, classmates.
Good
Teacher
morning.
ka na ba ngayon?
Hindi, classmate ko kayo eh.
Oh,
Classmates tayo, matagal na. Pero, reminiscing lang, reminiscing.
reminiscing. Good morning to all the people watching on the replay and or watching live. If you are joining us live, please join our discussion with Lex Ledesma. And this is our second discussion, the second book. Okay, lumabas na. And it's all about reset. Actually, this is a very timely book, no? Um, and Lex will talk to us about how to rewire our mindset for the post-COVID world, no? And then maybe you could talk to us or share with us yung Amazon publishing journey mo rin, uh, on your second book. Okay, so if you're watching on the replay, please put your questions in the comment section, or if you're watching the live stream, join our discussion this morning. All right, thank you. And we're here talking to thank you for talking to. Okay, Lex, maybe Suguro, can you please introduce Reset and maybe introduce yourself as well to our
Sure.
audience. Yeah.
Yes. Well, my academic background is a little bit weird because I started off studying engineering. So I studied civil engineering and I think blockmates ata tayo, Rach. Eh.
Of
so,
course.
first year college, magkasama kasi. So I was civil engineering for undergrad. I studied civil and environmental engineering for my master's. And then when it was time to take my PhD, sabi ko sa sarili ko, ayoko na ng numbers. I want to switch. So I tried out psychology only to find out that there was so many numbers in statistics in psychology. But anyway, after 8 years, I finished that. And then I um, sort of shifted careers into something else. So Reset was really a pandemic baby. Because I figured I had studied psychology for so long and there were some skills that I felt I could share. So I wanted to help other people to deal with this pandemic. So my process was I reviewed all of the scientific experiments that have been peer reviewed and have been decided by the community, the general psychological community, to be completely valid and scientific. Of that, I picked the 100 best experiments, the 100 top experiments, and then I chose those that would help people in a time of pandemic. So it's really a history of psychology in a way, but I cherry picked the experiments that I felt would be most beneficial to our population and the general population in dealing with this terrible international crisis. So that was really the mindset behind putting up this book. So I did it in 5 weeks. So I wrote constantly 12 to 14 hours a day. And I really dove deep into this whole process. That 5 weeks already included editing, layout, cover design, etc. So I was working constantly because my goal was not necessarily to make the most money, but my goal was to get the book out to as many people as soon as possible. And so that's why I was uh, I was very driven to finish this book as soon as I could.
Okay, ang galing. So, let's get into how do we reset. Maybe we're now 6 months into the pandemic, no? Or ilang months na ba? 6 months. And then 2020 is about to end also, but we have the last 3 months of the year on making the most of 2020. But don't you feel parang the pandemic is getting to you also in our relationships and
For
all the
sure.
things? So
For
paano
all of
ba?
us. Lahat tayo.
Oh, lahat nga tayo eh. So how do we get started with the reset, Lex?
Right. Okay, so my book looks at 100 different ways, right? So what will work for you might not work for me. So I just wanted to share some ideas. There was research done in the 1920s and 1930s, which I feel is still applicable today in 2020. And it looks at what they call animal studies. It looks at rats and it looks at chimpanzees. Okay. And what they found was the rats and the chimpanzees are constantly learning, but they call it latent learning. Ang ibig sabihin, they're accumulating information, but they are not using that information until they need it. So for example, for the rats, they put the rat in a maze for 10 days. On the 11th day, they gave a prize at the end of that maze, which was food. And they saw that the rat instantly went through the maze quickly, taking the learning from the first 10 days, but was only applied on the 11th day. That was the rat studies. On the flip side, there were the chimpanzee studies where a very prominent psychologist named Wolfgang Kohler, and he actually created a whole genre of psychology called Gestalt psychology, which is a German a form of psychology which began in Germany. He was talking about analyzing chimpanzees for 6 years in an island called Tenerife. And what he did was he was looking at them and figuring out how do chimpanzees learn. And the smartest chimpanzees did not use trial and error. What they used was what he calls insight learning, where they analyzed the situation and came up with a unique solution instantly by first thinking about it, discerning, and then acting. So, what he saw with the rats and what he saw with the chimpanzees is human beings can also be that way. We can also use our insight learning and our latent learning. What does this mean? This means that throughout the course of our lifetime, we have been accumulating solutions, absorbing our environment. And now is the time that we can take all of that information and make something out of it. So most people think that as they go through the course of their day, they're not really learning. But if you really think about it, every day of your life prior to today was a learning experience. And if we are now in a time of crisis, we are now in a time of COVID where we have to quiet ourselves down. So the solutions to our grand problems can be solved if we tap the knowledge that is already inside us. Kung kaya siya ng chimpanzee, kaya siya ng rat. All the more human beings that we have the solutions already today. So we know our problems, but very few of us recognize the solutions. And if we look for solutions, a lot of times we look outside of ourselves. And that's not a bad thing, but we should also look inside of ourselves and understand that that latent learning can be tapped. Now, if you just focus on it and try to sort out what the problem is and how you can best solve it. So it's like the recognition that there are solutions to every single problem we have. And for me, that's hopeful because
Mhm.
our problems are specific, some of them are general, but those problems are not unsolvable. All our problems are solvable. So if the rats can do it and the chimpanzees can do it, then surely we can do it too.
Mhm. Is there a way to activate it ba? Or a
Yeah,
routine to activate it?
yes, yes. Actually, most well, not necessarily most, but many artistic and scientific breakthroughs were actually created in a time of mindlessness. Okay, not necessarily mindfulness. So mindfulness is a trend right now where you're trying to become fully aware of your entire situation. Mindlessness is the opposite of that, where you are awake but half asleep. So a lot of scientific breakthroughs and a lot of artistic breakthroughs were created early in the morning, right when you wake up, or right before you sleep, when you are very tired. And what you need to do is to go in a state of being half awake and half asleep, where you are tapping your subconscious and unconscious. So one way that I do that personally, having read this research, is I'll watch YouTube videos of things that I'm completely not interested in. For example,
Mm-mm.
basketball.
Mm.
I'm not interested in basketball. I will watch basketball games and allow my eyes to blur. Allow my eyes to blur. So you're watching, but you're not really absorbing. And what you're trying to do is tap that unconscious and find your insight and your latent learning. So it's a little bit of an unusual way to find a solution, because sometimes people think that you have to think, but a lot of times you don't have to think, and the solution automatically surfaces. So it's an unusual way, but for me it's very very effective, because you know um, people always say that they get the solution in their sleep or in their dreams, but
Oo.
it's when your mind is resting that the novel or the new idea can really surface. So you want to fast track that, where you can tap this latent learning, and you have to also trust that that knowledge is already inside of you. It is already there. So you have to be able to just access it, but it's already inside there for you to find.
Galing ah. So, and kaya siguro rin ano no, like in the US, a lot of CBD products are very popular these days.
That's right. That's right. But I feeling ko, even without drugs, without an external enhancement, you can find that inside of yourself. Eh.
Oo.
Actually, relatedly, no, relatedly, there is something called the growth mindset. You
Oo.
might have heard about this, no? So the growth mindset is the idea that when you experience great struggle, great hardship, it can go two ways. You can go post traumatic stress disorder, or you can go post traumatic growth. You can go
Yes.
in two directions, right? And the idea is, if you learn how to accept the pain, in fact, trauma therapists always say, embrace the pain. First, once ang first kasi once the trauma happens, right? We are now in a state of perpetual trauma that has been caused by the greatest disease that we have experienced in our lifetime. Okay, so lahat tayo may trauma, right? So the first experience with trauma is shock. But once we are over the shock, then we need to embrace the pain. So this is now after 6 months. Tapos na yung shock eh. We've already
Oo.
accepted na, oh my
Acceptance.
gosh, ibang klase itong coronavirus, itong COVID na to. So tanggap na natin. We don't know how long it will last. So now is the time to embrace the pain, right? Because this growth mindset was actually created in tandem with another idea called learned helplessness. Learned helplessness was an idea where the electrocuted dogs. Okay, this was quite some time ago. Wala pang animal rights in the 1970s. The electrocuted dogs, some dogs were harnessed to the ground. Some dogs were not harnessed. The dogs that were harnessed never jumped away from the electrocution even when the harness was removed. So it's like some people, because they've experienced so much pain, they just accept the situation. They don't do anything to get out of it. So this was created in the 70s by a man named Martin Seligman, a psychologist. This Martin Seligman, maybe he was so upset about his own work, he decided to create a new form of psychology called positive psychology, helping people to reach their greatest selves. So when Carol Dweck read this research of Martin Seligman, she said, I cannot accept that people are just trained to be helpless. So let's say if they're poor and uneducated, and they'll just be poor and uneducated forever, accepting the electric shock. So she said, I will create something to fight against the learned helplessness. And that's what became growth mindset, where she got students and she picked the most motivated students as well as the most unmotivated students. So ito yung mga tamad na estudyante. And these were picked by teachers, school psychologists, principals. He said, give me the students that have the lowest motivation. She put both the motivated and the unmotivated in an intensive training program, teaching them that to reach success, failure is inevitable and a part of that process. So when you have a big goal, you have to fail. So she helped them to anticipate the failure and
Okay.
told them that failure is part of success. So when it comes, you know it's coming, you
Mhm.
embrace it rather than be broken by it. So it's like, for example, when you're running a marathon, alam ko si Anton has run some marathons, ako din, you will always hit the wall. The wall tells you, hindi mo na to kaya, quit ka na, what are you doing here? It's too painful. And that actually happens 80% of the distance before you reach your end goal.
Mhm.
When you're near the end, that's when the wall normally comes, which is ironic because to go 20% more when you finish 80% is more a mind game than a physical game. So the growth mindset was able to teach both the motivated and the unmotivated students that this pain is going to come. This wall is going to come. This hardship and failure is going to come. But it is a necessary part of future success. So that mindset was able to change them. So feeling ko itong growth mindset can fight learned helplessness, but it can also help us to tap the solutions which have already been put there through latent learning, which is what I talked about earlier, to create breakthrough and insight. So this is something that I think is very, very important. It's a mindset change. Eh. It's a mindset change where you recognize that we cannot not do anything. We have to do something.
Pero Lex, question. What if you're, syempre, most of us are burnt out also and you don't have time to think about all these things. How can you activate that post traumatic growth mindset?
Right. Okay. Actually, for me, one thing that Filipinos have in particular is we have very active groups, right? So our groups mostly are our barkada, our friends, our family, right? So my opinion is we need to activate this strength, which is our groups, to find solutions. Now, there's an idea called groupthink. And groupthink is actually the study of failure. And it looks at different wars. So Bay
Mm.
of Pigs, Vietnam War, Pearl Harbor, these were giant failures for the most intelligent, most powerful country and countries in the world. So if you think, how come the Americans went into Vietnam War when they were so powerful but they were beaten by the Vietnamese? What were the mistakes that happened? So what happened was groupthink. What is interesting is there are transcripts of how these decisions were made. So in the 1970s, a psychologist with the last name of Janis studied these errors. And what Janis found was that all the mistakes at war were made in the same way. These were very powerful generals that were making the decisions, but there was no variance among the generals. They were all old, they were all schooled in the same schools, they all had the same exact perspective. When the younger military officers would speak, the older ones would unconsciously shut them down. Hindi nila pinapakinggan. Kami yung senior dito. And then they caricatured their opponent. They looked at their opponent as easy to beat and they
Mhm.
felt we are on the good side. Those are the bad people. And so they had a caricature of them. The loudest ones, the most powerful ones, were the ones who made the decisions. There was stereotyping made both on the side of the allies as well as the side of the enemy. Hindi sila gumawa ng plan B. They never created a plan B, a plan C because they felt we're going to Vietnam against these Vietnamese. Wala silang war, wala silang weapons. How can
Oo.
they beat us? Impossible. Without realizing that they didn't understand the jungle terrain. And those tunnels that were built by the Vietnamese were so small So the physical bodies of the Americans could not enter those tunnels. So what was the characteristics of the group that made the faulty decisions? They were homogeneous, meaning they were all the same, very small group, very tight group, and they only had one type of person represented. So this created groupthink.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you fight against groupthink? You
Mm-mm.
have to get opinions from people that are not just the leaders of the pack. So for example, within a family, will the kids go into homeschooling, or will they continue with their online learning via internet? That's a very major decision for many families today. Most of the time, the parents will make that decision on their own. So isn't that groupthink? When the mom and the dad says, okay, matanda na tayo, we know what's best for our children, we will now make this decision for them.
Mhm.
Or, God forbid you lost your job, which is very, very common today. So how are we going to make money enough to find food to eat in the time of a pandemic when no jobs are being offered? Again, many times it's the mother and the father, the husband and the wife that sit down and have this big grand discussion. Why don't we bring the lolo in? Why don't we bring the youngest child in? Why don't we bring the tito from the US in via a Zoom conversation? This is
Mm.
all to combat groupthink, where you're taking resources from all the people that love you to come up with the best solution, so you're not in a homogeneous, small, tight group making the decisions. When you're solving problems, you need inputs from as many different types of people as possible. So maybe your child has the solution, even if he happens to be 12 years old. Maybe he has the solution that you, who's so educated and successful, do not have, because yung perspective mo has already been trained by 40 plus years of experience. So again, these are things that we have to be creative eh. So feeling ko, the resource, if you do not have the strength, in prison they always say this, when you do not have the strength today, you borrow strength from your neighbor, from your friend. Humihiram ka ng lakas sa kaibigan mo. So that person will give you the strength to lend for that day. And then the next day, you will lend the strength to that person. So that combats groupthink, helps you to get into the growth mindset, gets rid of learned helplessness, and taps the latent learning to gain breakthrough and insight, which are all ideas that we've been discussing today.
Galing galing So wait, we'll pull in some comments, no? Sabi ni John Luke Quintana, I totally agree. Set your mind to accept 100 rejections. Tama ba yan, Lex?
Yeah, baka 1,000 rejections pa
Rejections,
in a
di ba?
life. You know what? In a lifetime, life is pain. Life is pain. Of course, life is also good. But
Oo.
life is equally pain. Kasi first of all, we are designed, our life is designed for pain. You
Mhm.
will not die at the same time as your beloved. You will not die at the same time. Your husband, your wife, your mother, your father, your brother, your sister. So whoever is left will experience pain. It's completely unavoidable. We will not all die at the same time. We will, so dun pa lang, from the way it's designed, sigurado yan. No matter how wealthy you will not die at the same time as your beloved. So,
Galing
and then on top of that, everything else is a series of failures, a series of pain. So, it's really just part of the human experience. So, why are we going to complain about it?
Mhm.
We should just accept it and just recognize. And I mean, even things like now in the time of pandemic, I'll share a personal story. My
Oo.
wife and I decided to write our last will and testament now, not because we're sick, but we're thinking, the reality of the certainty of death became very apparent to both of us, even if we're not sick, that you can get coronavirus and die, either of us. So we actually wrote down what we wanted to happen in case we passed away. And I felt that that was very liberating. It was not depressing for us. because it helps us to be realistic, but also not really fatalistic, but also grateful. You know, when you're writing your last will, you become grateful that, uy, kahit papano may mapapamana pala ako sa mga mahal ko sa buhay. It may not be billions, but at least somehow nakapundar kami ng kapiraso. So for me, that's something to celebrate, you know. And then even as I was writing, I didn't just write about what material possessions I had, but somehow you integrate your values. And I said, you know, this is what I believe in. This is my faith structure. This is who I am. My will was only 1 or 2 pages long, but I was able to write there the things that were important to me and the things that I wanted people to remember somehow. So I integrated both the legal component with the spiritual component in my will. My wife wrote her own version, and then we sent it off to our closest friends. So we said at least we have multiple copies with different people. I found so much value in that experience of writing my last will and testament.
Galing, galing. Wait, may man, Chona is saying hi. Hi, Lex. Chona
That's me.
Aison.
Hi,
Batchmate.
Chona. Kamusta?
And so John Luke has follow-up comments. Loving the real talk, accepting the negative things that happen in your life is a positive experience in itself. Galing. So, Lex, can we talk about the book? So, I'll share the book. I think so people can buy it in Amazon. And how do they consume the book? What's inside the book? Maybe can you talk about it?
Sure. Uh, the book is about 500 pages, more or less, no? But you don't need to read it from cover to cover because it's divided by sections. So let's say a section on emotion, a section on stress management, a section on attention. Um, so uh, depending on what chapter you gravitate towards or the issues or problems you're having, you can actually just read that chapter. Within each chapter are a series of experiments that have been validated by the psychological community and applied to the coronavirus time. So it's 100 ways that you can combat the stressors of the coronavirus. So this is something that I felt would be valuable to the general community. So I put it on Amazon. You can buy an ebook where they email it to you immediately, or you can get a print on demand hard copy that gets mailed to your house. So these are the different options for this book. It's
Wow.
inexpensive. It's $3.99. So that's less than a cup of expensive coffee.
Oo nga. Galing. Galing, galing. And then, and just to close this discussion, maybe can you share with us lang yung your Amazon publishing journey? I know that it started as as a coping mechanism, I guess, to write your stories from the prison's experience to now. But
Yeah.
you became successful at it. Maybe can you share us
Right.
some
Sure.
story about Amazon publishing during this time?
Yeah. Before I released the book, I spent many hours on YouTube trying to figure out how I could hack this system because the system is actually hackable. It's an algorithm. So I think you have to understand the nature of the algorithm. If you're selling, you will sell more. If you're not selling, you will not sell. So that's number one. Number two is you have to have reviews because the reviews are validation for Amazon that they should keep pushing you forward. And the third is you have to be in the right categories. So I quickly learned that if I entered self-help, there is no way that my book can rank because self-help is has the most number of books in it. So I actually just downloaded. It was I think $100. It was an app. It was a program. It's called KDP Rocket. And basically KDP Rocket gives you a deep analysis of each category in Amazon. So you have to position your book in the right categories. It's not actually that difficult to do. So for example, within the first day or two, I already ranked in teen science experiments and projects. So teen, so it's for teens and has science experiments and projects. If you look at the content of my book, pasok naman siya. Pwede naman, science experiments and projects. But it's particularly for the teen market. I did not write for fellow academics. So that ranked immediately. I became number one in teen science experiments and projects. And then I was able to become number one. I think the second was public health. Apparently, public health is not so big of a category. So that was where I ranked. So as I started to rank in the different categories, the bigger categories started to pick me up. So it was a slow process of ranking, and eventually it became the Amazon Hot New Release in 6 categories. It became a bestseller among the new releases in 6 categories. But it's kind of like organic, because you have to do well in one category and then it grows. Once you get that, then the bigger challenge now is sustainability. So you need to keep selling and getting reviews. But that program, that KDP Rocket program, I am certain that I wouldn't have ranked in any category if I didn't have that program, because it helped me to really analyze and understand where I would position my book. So if you're an author and you want to rank, I would say download this program for $100. You will pay yourself back for it for sure, and then spend a lot of time understanding the game before you even get on that platform, because otherwise you'll just get confused. There's so much. I took all that information and I tried to consolidate it into what I felt was useful and repetitive among the YouTube videos. Anton, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry.
Okay.
Is it okay to, in terms of the tone of the book, when I know a lot of people are considering to write also, do you write for a Filipino audience, or you have to be intentional to write it for a global audience?
Well, it depends who your market is. But when I was writing, I was very clear. I'm writing for an American high school audience, because that was so my language, the words I would use, the tonal quality was for the a broad based US based. So I was not writing for the UK. I was not writing, and that's because the largest population of book buyers are Americans, and I was particularly writing for um, not just I was writing for Middle America, and not just the states where other Filipinos live, like New York and California.
Uh,
So I was writing in that particular way because I wanted to get more people to read my book. I was not writing for academics like myself, because the way you write for other academics is very, very different. So that's what I was intentionally not doing. And I think that's part of the success formula, because a lot of the feedback has been, it's so easy to read, it's so non-technical, it's not written for psychologists, it's so simple. And
mm-mm.
that was intentional. I didn't want to be a highfalutin. I wanted to get more people to read my book. I mean, that's the basic idea. So the more inclusive it is, the better. So that's what I was trying to do, as opposed to make it very exclusive that only one market can appreciate and understand.
Galing, galing. I remember parang ikaw si ano eh. Yung there was this book that we like, Predictably Irrational, na
Yeah.
ano ba, no, about all the experiments and applying it. Ang galing. So, thank you so much for your time, Lex. And I know a lot of people will benefit from this book. But just some final thoughts, if you can talk to particularly our audience, the Filipinos, on how to, thrive, and not only thrive, but you've seen a lot of people also para talagang nagka post-traumatic growth sila, no, because they embrace the pain.
Yeah.
Can you talk to them directly and your
Yes, yes. So this was an experiment done where they got 300 people and they asked them, "What do you regret?" And what they found was that 75% of people regret the things that they did not do but they wish they had done. Only 25% regret the things they did do but wish they hadn't. So, my message to everybody is, now is the time of life reckoning. You have to really ask yourself, today, what are my regrets? Now go out and do it. Make it happen. Find a way to make that regret a thing of the past. actualize the thing that is on your mind. So let's say if you have issues with somebody, your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, heal that today. Don't wait until tomorrow, because if one of you passes away, you will regret that until the day you're out of this world. So if you do something about it and you still mess it up, as per this research, you will not regret that. But if you don't do anything about it, that will be your biggest life regret. So I would encourage everybody, this is a time for action. We're in the time of a global international pandemic where even whether we will live till tomorrow is a little bit uncertain. So, given that, we should take this research and learn from it and do something about your regrets so you don't live a life of regrets, which I think is the greatest sin, the greatest curse that you can put on yourself. So, for me, attack your regrets so they don't keep on going, and then you will be happier. You will live a better life for sure.
Galing. Can we have a photo, Lex? Okay, one, two. Andali one more wait hinihintay ko yung ano eh. Okay, one, two. Just look at the lens. Okay, one, two. All right, thank you. Lex, may nagtatanong. Social media detail. Nako, ito nga. Do you have a social media ba? Kasi if people wants to contact you, what's the best way? And
Sure.
if we're back in PH, kasi di ba, this is a really good gift to give during
Yes.
this season. But I know
Yeah.
it's also available in Amazon now. So what are your
Sure.
plans?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is I have an Instagram. It's at Lex Ledesma. So just contact me there, and we can communicate about getting the paperback books that you would like. I think you're on mute, Anton.
Finally, the last question. Is there a third book?
You know what? I actually have a book cover already. So I need to ask permission from my wife, because for the 5 weeks that I wrote this book, she was really just providing me food and I was just writing constantly. So if she agrees to bear with me for another 5 weeks, I have another very interesting book idea in mind. So papaalam muna ako kay Mrs.
Galing. So we're excited for that, and I'm excited to just see your journey, no, from the prison book, your learnings to reset, and everything. What's happening with you during this pandemic? Thank you so much, classmate.
Salamat. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you,
thank you so much. For those people watching, you can actually will share your. So where can they message you? You can.
Instagram at Lex Ledesma. It's an open account, so they can get in touch
Ito.
with me.
Wow. Okay. So this
Yeah,
your next Ledesma.
yeah,
Okay, we'll follow this.
sure.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lex. Thank you for
Thank
your
you,
time.
Lex.
All right, thank
Till the
you.
next time. And
Good
thank you. Ang
Salamat.
galing ng mga insights. I think a lot of people will really benefit from it here also in Manila. All right.
All
Thank you.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Salamat.